up and sit down.
Hey there, Champagne Dreamers. Welcome back to another fabulous episode of JANESSA After Dark. Now, of course, if you've been paying attention to our publication schedule, you know that we have released the first 3 episodes of Season 2, which means that this is no ordinary episode of JANESSA After Dark. This is one of our fabulous, spectacular, stupendous, sloppy seconds episodes. This is a chance for you to get to know the guests of our previous 3 episodes just a little bit better, with some outtakes that didn't make it into the full episode. And this Sloppy Seconds is going to be a special treat for all of our horror fans out there, because of course the first 3 guests for Season 2 of JANESSA After Dark are all fantastic, creative people who are very involved in the horror genre. Episode 1 featured independent horror film director Heidi Moore of Wretched Productions. Her film Dolly Deadly is one of the best, most surreal, campy, gory, funny, independent horror films that I have seen in a long time. If you have not seen it, pause this podcast and go check it out. You can go to Troma Pictures and check out their streaming service where the film is available. And the sequel to the film, Kill, Dolly Deadly 2, is being produced in association with Troma Pictures, the iconic home of the Toxic Avenger. Episode 2 featured the very sexy good old boy from South Carolina, Tommy Faircloth of Horse Creek Productions. His most recent film, Family Possessions, is a very clever blend of a slasher film and a supernatural film. And his upcoming film, A Nun's Curse, features iconic horror actress Felissa Rose. Now, Tommy and I had a chance to dish a little bit about Felissa because, of course, Sleepaway Camp is my favorite horror movie of all time. And she got to give me her perspective. Felissa Rose was the guest on episode 3 of season 2. Best known for her role as Angela Baker in the cult classic and sometimes divisive film Sleepaway Camp, Felissa Rose has been very active in the independent horror scene and has been featured in Victor Crowley of the Hatchet series, the new movie Death House, which features Kane Hodder, Bill Moseley, Sid Haig, Dee Wallace, Barbara Crampton, and other huge names from the horror genre. Some people call it the Expendables of horror, and recently also did her first comedic role outside of the horror genre in the film Garlic and Gunpowder. I had a great time with all 3 of my guests, and I am so excited for you to hear these additional pieces of their interviews and get a little bit more perspective on what we talked about. And for you horror fans, we are not done yet. I'm hoping to have more great horror-related content throughout season 2. And now let's dive into the interview, shall we? First up, we've got some outtakes with Season 2, Episode 2 guest Tommy Faircloth. Tommy's an independent director who has been making films since the late 1990s, and his most recent film, Family Possessions, features both Felissa Rose from Sleepaway Camp and Nightmare on Elm Street 2 star Mark Patton. In this first outtake, Tommy and I talk a little bit about Felissa Rose and how much we both enjoy spending time with her, and she really is a fantastic person to spend time around. If you ever have a chance, she does tons of conventions and fan events. If you see that she's in your neighborhood, it's definitely worthwhile stopping over to say hello. If you do, tell her Janessa sent you. And then we talk a little bit about the fact that he is on season 2. And in this clip, I reveal some of my own ineptitude as a wannabe podcaster as I share how I determined what would be season 1 of JANESSA After Dark and what would be season 2. And if you listen really carefully, I also preview a dream guest for the podcast. Here's hoping we can make it happen. Enjoy!
Alrighty, I'll tell Felissa we're going to be talking about her, so.
Yes, tell Felissa.
Definitely want to hear it.
I know, because I want to hit her up and I want her to do an interview too, so you should tell her how fun it was and how we had the best time. So.
Because I even told her, I said, I'm doing a podcast with Janessa, and she's like, oh my God, I love her. So yeah, I'm sure she will.
That'd be so wonderful. I love her.
She's at a convention this weekend, but yeah, I'm sure she'll totally do one.
We're getting ready to head into season 2. I don't know what that means. So some podcast people seem to have a sense of like, this is when a season is and this is how long it goes. Mm-hmm. I just decided it's been a year since I launched the first episode and I'm so fucking random at this shit. So I was like, well, I guess now we're in season 2.
Yeah.
So season 2 is going to be more focused on horror specifically.
Cool.
That's why I thought it would be fun to get you and Heidi and maybe Felissa, and I'm going to see if Derek Mears will sit down with me and just talk to some fun horror folks.
Yeah, well, thanks for including me.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's always lovely to see you. I prefer earlier in the day, but it's lovely to see you anytime. Well, whatever Tommy said to Felissa must have worked, because Felissa was indeed our guest for episode 3 of season 2. Her outtakes will be coming up a little bit later in this episode, but for now we've got more of Tommy Faircloth. Now at the end of that clip, we laughed about how I prefer seeing Tommy earlier in the day, and that refers to the first ever Days of the Dead convention in Charlotte, North Carolina, when Tommy's partner Rob decided to crash my hotel room with 3 or 4 friends at about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Take some more photos with you, see some of your outfits, and crash your hotel room at 3 a.m. again.
Yeah, that was a mess. Oh, that's a story for another day. And of course, don't forget that you can hear about all of the shenanigans in my interview with Tommy Faircloth in season 2, episode 2. Now in this next clip, I don't know if I'm low-key trying to get sponsored by Petco or what it is, but I always manage to talk to my guests about their pets. Now, just like Erica Kaufman from season 1, episode 4, Tommy has a 4-legged friend who has his very own Instagram presence. So first of all, you have 6 dogs.
Yeah.
Because I only ever see, is it Hank the Frenchie is always on Instagram?
Yeah, he has his own Instagram, you know. But no, I've got 6 dogs. He's the most attention because he's the youngest and the wildest. I've got 3 chihuahuas and the oldest one's 16, and so they're just not having any of it. They just kind of like to chill, not go on trips or do anything. They just kind of stay home. But Hank is my Frenchie, and then I have 2 other Boston Terriers, and those are the ones we take, when we go camping and things like that.
If you get a chance, definitely check out Tommy Faircloth and Hank the Frenchie on Instagram. Tommy shared a video where the two shared a soft serve ice cream cone, and that was one of the most stupid cute things I have ever seen. All right, in this next clip, we talk a little bit more about Felissa Rose and about how she became friends with Mark Patton, and then Tommy spills a little bit of tea from one of their film festival adventures. Enjoy.
From, when she was in Family Possessions, Mark Patton was in it as well from Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And up to that point, those two had not met, but they met from being in Family Possessions, and those two are like inseparable now. They weren't in any scenes together, and they didn't see each other while we were filming, but after the fact, once we started going to festivals and things like that, they were just like 2 pairs, and, 2 peas in a pod, always together. But yeah, she likes Fireball, so that's probably one of my favorite stories about her involved when we had a screening at Sleepaway Camp at a Crimson Screen Horror Film Festival a couple of years ago, which is a festival I run. We had tons of Fireball shots for the audience before we started watching it, and it turned into kind of like a Rocky Horror version, or everybody was quoting lines from the movie. And after that, we had her Q&A, and by then she was just hammered, did not care. It was after like about 30 minutes, I was like, okay, we're going to cut this off, just kind of looking at part. But that's probably my favorite story, because she did not care. I was like, they're just dropping F-bombs. The guy was trying to interview her, and he was kind of intimidated. I was like, no, it's cool, it's cool.
Conventions and film festivals are always home to their fair share of drunken shenanigans. But when I started attending Days of the Dead conventions in summer of 2016, I was surprised to find that they could also be home to something else: large pockets of queer folks, especially gay men. In this next clip, Tommy and I talk about why gays might be attracted to the horror genre, and he explains why he almost never introduces himself as a gay filmmaker. When I started going to the Days of the Dead events, I kind of discovered horror conventions late. I went to my first ever horror convention 2 years ago. I was really kind of surprised. I mean, this is obviously from a very limited experience with just Days of the Dead conventions, but I was really surprised by how many queer folks I met that are involved in making independent film and especially independent horror. Do you think there's a good representation of different kinds of people who are making independent horror? Did I just happen to stumble across a particularly queer-friendly convention, or what's going on with queer folks in indie horror?
I don't know. Maybe it's a DNA thing where gay people like horror movies. I don't know. Because there is a lot of people that are gay that are filmmakers. So I don't know. It might be just the genre they kind of migrate to, I know personally when I started, back in the 90s, I didn't know many filmmakers at all, especially if they were gay or not. So that wasn't even, something I thought about. But, once I came back second around and started again and going on the circuit, I've met tons of filmmakers that happen to be gay. One thing you may see is being a filmmaker, you don't want to segregate yourself or alienate an audience. So you just say you're a filmmaker. The only thing that I set off to describe myself differently is that I'm a horror filmmaker. But then you run into gay horror filmmakers, women horror filmmakers, gay women horror. And it's just like you start doing all these little branches and branches and branches. But so there's probably a lot of filmmakers out there that are gay, that are into horror. They just don't choose to say because they're kind of worried that they may alienate their audience. I think it's kind of part of the gay culture. I think they like the drama and the horror, and all the makeup and everything that goes with it. A lot of people I meet are like, oh, I didn't know you were gay, and I didn't know your partner, you were together. I just thought you just did horror. And I'm like, no, we are. I just don't go there going, oh, yes, I'm a gay horror filmmaker. So, but I guess the fact that I had drag queens in my film might give it away. So.
Now, when Tommy gave me his reason for not introducing himself as a gay filmmaker, I have to admit, the late 90s shit-starting activist in me kind of started to get a little bit twitchy. But that's one of the pieces from his interview that I really sat with and thought about and percolated on for a long time, and I thought that his perspective is not without its merit. After all, when I was first planning to go to Days of the Dead, I was a little bit nervous about whether or not I would find a place for myself in the crowd. Their marketing materials were very dark and heavy metal, and I just didn't know if the crowd there would be ready for a 6-foot-something plus-size drag queen. Now, it turns out that my experience at Days of the Dead was really fantastic, and I have raved about it many times on the podcast before, but the fact remains that any community, including the horror community, can have places where queer folks don't feel welcome. And when you're an independent artist and you're trying to find an audience for the art that you create, there are times where you really have to examine your comfort level and figure out for yourself what the balance is between being open and honest and putting the art before the artist. I do have one more brief outtake with Tommy where we talk about some of the Easter eggs that are there for horror fans in his film Family Possessions, but to hear that, you're gonna have to wait until the end of the episode. Next up, we're looking at my interview from Season 2, Episode 1, Heidi Moore. In this first outtake, Heidi Moore and I try to figure out if we've ever actually met in person before, and then we talk a little bit about fan conventions. I've spoken many times, including on this exact episode, about my fantastic experiences at the Days of the Dead conventions. However, we talk a little bit about the other side of conventions, the commercial side. Conventions can be very expensive, and the desire to go and be part of that community can actually be detrimental to those who are working really hard and putting a lot of their hard-earned money into creating the art that the fans at those conventions love so much. Enjoy! All right, how are you today?
I'm good.
That's good. I'm super excited. I don't know if I actually met you in Atlanta or not, because I know I picked up Dolly Deadly in Atlanta at Days of the Dead.
No, one of my friends brought some of the movies there, so I wasn't there. Actually, in Atlanta?
Yeah,
no,
so not this past year, but the year before.
No, actually, my friend wasn't there either. I wonder who that could have been.
Oh, what's the company that was distributing your films? Legless Corpse?
Yeah.
I think they might have been there. I think they had a table.
Okay.
So I wasn't sure, because then when I saw you, I saw your picture on Facebook, and I was like, well, she doesn't look familiar from the booth, but I'm terrible at recognizing people, so I didn't know if I had actually met you there. And that's the first time I saw your film. Apparently, we haven't ever met in person then, it sounds like.
No.
And I wonder, do you do a lot of the conventions and, any of those kind of gatherings? And if you do, what are kind of your reactions to the sort of fandom that's on display and the kind of interactions that you have at those events?
Honestly, I don't go to any conventions only because I'm so broke. Like, making these films, it's pretty much all out of pocket. And so that's all I have money for, is to actually make the movie. I don't even have enough to enter to film festivals or anything. I just have enough to I don't even have enough, but I scrape up enough to just make the damn thing. it's been a goal of mine to be able to attend some conventions, but I haven't been able to yet.
Yeah, they're super expensive. I was thinking about this at the last one because I go to a couple each year and I plan for just a couple because they are so expensive. The only reason I kind of justify it is because I use it for website promotion and all that kind of stuff. But the amount of money that people spend on these conventions, and it becomes this sort of consumer celebration of the fandom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's interesting is that some of the best interactions that I've had are the ones that have nothing to do with money. You know, the photo ops and all that kind of stuff, all that is great, but some of the best interactions are just random interactions with people in hotel lobbies. I'm always kind of wondering, and it's hard when you're in the middle of nowhere to try to figure out, like, how do we make that happen in a way that's more accessible? So it's not just, let's come to this big expensive kind of thing, but how do we get those people who are there to come together as more of a community?
That's a tough one.
Because I think social media is kind of an answer, but it's not the same as that in person. Like, even if we go with our best intentions, we sometimes become the worst versions of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to just kind of dismiss things or to even just kind of disconnect from it. It's so easy to just say, oh, I don't have time to look at that for a week or two and step away from it. So I don't know. It's hard to think about how do you build that same sort of camaraderie. It's an interesting challenge.
Any human interaction is an interesting challenge to me.
Well, yeah. And if you want to hear all about the movies that Heidi Moore has been producing through her production company, Wretched Productions, don't forget to go check out the full episode featuring her interview. But when she's not creating art, she likes to take part in a little bit of pop culture. And so she and I talked about some of our favorite guilty pleasures, ranging from Barb in season 1 of Stranger Things to Sex and the City and Charmed. No judgment, please. Like a lot of people, I loved season 1. I have a little obsession with Barb. I want to know more about Barb. I'm going to turn into one of those people that like reads Barb fan fiction. And I was so fascinated by her. And I thought, because she's like the perfect friend. Like, the reason she dies is because she's waiting around for her dumbass friend who's making bad decisions with stupid boys. And she just waits there for her instead of going home and being like, you're a bitch, and like taking off. She waits there. And that's what gets her. Ugh.
She should have just, like, called the girl's mom and been like, oh, hey, why don't you come over here and peek through the window, see what's going on?
Yeah, bust this up.
One of those shitty friends. I'm going to call your mom. Oh, I love Charmed. I've watched that series 8 times, probably. And I just keep watching it. I'm like, oh, man, like, all they want is, like, a husband and to have kids. And it's, like, all they ever talk about and think about. And they're just, like, wearing kind of skimpy clothes while they're running around fighting. But I can't stop.
That is so funny. I'm currently watching my way through Charmed right now.
Oh, it's so good.
Yep.
I can't stop watching it. I never will.
I like it. That's one of the ones that I like to work through. That one I don't go through as often as, like, Buffy. Like, I'll watch my way through Buffy more often than I do through Charmed. Because Buffy, I feel like it's easier to make it all the way to the end. Charmed, I like it through the first, like, 6, 7 seasons. The last season or 2 is where it gets a little bit dicey for me.
Yeah, and even I'm watching it, I'm like, I know. Like, if someone else is there, I'm like, I know. You know what? Maybe you shouldn't even watch it. I feel bad for you. Like, but I'm going to still watch it. There was an episode where they're, like, fighting pro wrestlers who were playing demons, and it was just so stupid. But I had to watch it.
I've always loved mermaids ever since I was a kid. And that's how I got into Charmed in the first place, is I just happened to be flipping through the channels. And there's a season 5 episode where Phoebe turns into a mermaid. Mm-hmm. And Jamie, what's her name? Jamie Lynn Presley is a mermaid. And so they're trying to help her. And then Phoebe becomes a mermaid. And I didn't know anything about the show. I just knew that I had to watch the series so that I could figure out what the hell that episode was about. And so I started at the beginning.
You should have called me. I would have told you all about it.
I need a recap of seasons 1 through 4 so I know why Phoebe's a mermaid.
Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely love it. I really like Sex and the City, although it's not aging well. Like, now I go back to it and I'm like, oh, this is much cringier than I remember it being. And especially Sarah Jessica Parker's. I don't know if you've ever watched Sex and the City.
It's a little bit.
Her character is she's just a game player, and she puts herself into these awful situations and then kind of gives the camera these poor me eyes. And it's like, you are an adult. Like, you should be responsible for your choices in this life.
Do you yell that at the TV?
I do now. I'm like, oh, what is wrong with you?
I always think, like, whenever I'm watching stuff like that, I don't know. I'm just like, I am calling the police. I need to tell somebody this is not okay.
Yeah. That concludes the outtakes from Season 2, Episode 1 guest Heidi Moore. Heidi is also going to be featured in the introduction of one of the episodes for my upcoming limited podcast series, Miss Jaye, The Renovation. More information and episodes coming very soon. Now, to round out this episode of Sloppy Seconds, we've got some outtakes with iconic horror legend Felissa Rose. In this first outtake, we talk about some of the co-stars from Sleepaway Camp that she's kept up with over the years, especially the ones that I find particularly attractive. One counselor in particular was known for his very short shorts. Enjoy!
And you know who called me today like a million times, but I had to call him back? Ronnie. Called Angela.
Ronnie with those little shorts. Oh my God.
Oh my God, Ronnie.
That awakened
Ronnie
some things in me.
Character, huh? He is Ronnie in real life. He doesn't, I mean, I have to say it, that red sweatsuit is really his.
I love it.
So, yeah. I don't know. I have to call him back. He just called like a few minutes ago. Every time he calls, I'm like, there's like, everything going on.
You should try to get Jonathan Tiersten, too. He's a cute little nugget. I wouldn't mind getting a little bit of that.
Yes, and I think you definitely can, for sure. I know. It's just that every time he goes, he's like a lunatic. He's crazy.
Ah, yes, Jonathan Tiersten is one fine-looking man. And his Sleepaway Camp character, Ricky, delivers one of my favorite movie insults ever. In a scene where the boys are playing softball against each other and the game's getting a little bit heated, one of the older campers, Bill, tells Ricky to eat shit and die. And then Ricky says, "Eat shit and live, Bill." I always forget that line is there, and then when it happens, it cracks my shit up. Every damn time. In this next outtake, we talk a little bit more about the perceived transphobia in Sleepaway Camp, as well as have a little bit of discussion about the sequels, Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3, and why she decided not to appear in the sequels as Angela Baker. It's not the reason you think.
And then there's a lot of talk about, are we saying Angela's a transvestite and she's a murderer?
Yeah. And I think that the sequels, they definitely dip into being a little bit more transphobic, the way they talk about Angela, and they kind of set up this thing where she's transitioned, but the way that it comes about. So I definitely see how if people are looking at the series as a whole, if they take in those sequels, it kind of changes it. But I think the original film doesn't have that in it.
I don't think so. I think the original film is more about a young person who's been through a lot.
Did they approach you about the sequels at all?
They did, yes. So I was like 17 and I had just applied to go to college and I really, really wanted to go to school. I met with Michael Simpson and I even read some of the scripts with him. He had me read some of the new Angela, the late 80s Angela. And to be honest, I sucked. I was so bad. I can still remember sitting in his apartment in Manhattan and reading those lines. The only Angela I knew was Angela from the original one. So he was super close with Pam Springsteen. I guess they met on some movie, and maybe he knew her also from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And then he said she's going to play Angela, and I went off to school, and that was the end. And she did 2 and 3. They filmed them in Georgia, back to back, in like 1986 or 87.
Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3 definitely had a very different tone from the original film. And maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I loved the quiet, unassuming Angela from the original. I thought Pamela Springsteen was a lot of fun. The sequels are sort of campy and the gore is definitely over the top, but they have a very different feeling than that original film. So as much as they're fun, they just don't have the same mystery as the original. Now, in my interview with Felissa Rose in Season 2, Episode 3, I asked her a question that she said she had never been asked before. Is Aunt Martha the villain of Sleepaway Camp? To hear her answer on that, make sure you go and check out the full-length episode. But during our discussion of the character of Aunt Martha, she told me about a typical fan reaction that she's heard many times over the years, which was something about the character that I had never thought of. Enjoy!
It's funny because people have asked me, through the years, if Aunt Martha is a drag queen. Did you ever think about that?
I didn't. Like, she was definitely kooky, but she always struck me as like almost like a cartoon character.
Look at her. Oh my God, her hands. And I'm like, I don't know. I think she's amazing looking. And I thought her personality was super incredible. I never thought that, but people ask me all the time, is the actor a man? And I said, no. She's Desiree Gould. She lives in New York City, and she's cool as hell. But I think that's an interesting, that would be a really cool take on it. That could have been super, awesome.
So,
right?
Yeah.
I can't believe you never thought about that.
I would love to see more Aunt Martha. I never, for some reason, that side of it never occurred to me. I think because she just seems so much a representative of being normal and heterosexuality that the idea that she would be a drag queen was just so far out of my mind.
Oh, come downstairs in my perfect house. I'm a doctor. Yeah. Fuck you, Aunt Martha. You're crazy.
She's crazy.
You're crazy. You sending those kids to camp. You're the doctor. So interesting. Did that give you a clue that something was interesting or odd or weird when she said, I'm a doctor?
Well, I did kind of wonder because she said she was a doctor and then she also said, don't tell anybody that I did your physicals here. They wouldn't like it. There's nothing wrong with it, but they wouldn't like it. And I was like, why is she doing the physicals at home? I love that you know it verbatim. I've seen this movie many times.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Now, I think we need to definitely make another film.
I would love it. While Aunt Martha is one of the fictional characters that I love, this next outtake deals with somebody that I love in real life, Lainie Kazan. Felissa was lucky enough to work with Lainie Kazan on her comedic role in Garlic and Gunpowder, and in this outtake she talks about what the actress is like off-screen and how her real-life persona matches up with what you expect of her from all of her great film roles. Lainie Kazan was in Garlic and Gunpowder. Did you get to work with her very much?
Okay, so I didn't work with her in terms of my character, but I'm one of the producers on it. So I got to work with her, and I'm madly in love. I've always loved Lainie Kazan.
Yeah.
And then working with her, she is just a breath of fresh air. Sunshine, love, and here she is this, icon, legendary, and she's the sweetest person on the set. So I was thrilled to meet her and work with her. She was so cool. I loved her so much. I sent some flowers afterwards, and her manager called me and said, she loves them. She's a role model. She's so cool.
Oh, I love to hear that because she's one of those people that I've always loved, and so it's nice to hear that she's fantastic in person.
Oh my gosh, you need to meet her. She's just outrageously perfect. Really, super nice.
And of course, in our full interview, Felissa and I talked a little bit about convention and fan events. She's a big fan of these types of events, and she does at least 1 or 2 a month. And I am actually relatively new to conventions. So far, I've attended 5 Days of the Dead events in Indianapolis, Atlanta, and Charlotte, North Carolina. And the first Days of the Dead event that I went to in Indianapolis in 2016 is where I met Felissa and developed my friendship with her. Now in January, I'm set to go back to Atlanta for another Days of the Dead. In this next outtake, we talk a little bit about what my preconceived notions of conventions were and explore a little bit more about the appeal of the feel behind a convention and how beneath all the blood and the gore, it's all about the love.
Doesn't it feel that way to you?
It was very welcoming. I was really surprised. Like, conventions were never something that really appealed to me. It was just, I had a vacation planned.
Well, what did you think of them? Like, what was your perception? What did you feel they would be like?
Yeah, my perception is it was going to be, you go to a big sort of event hall or something, and it's just very impersonal. You just stand in a line and you throw some money on the table and they sign a picture and hand it to you. And I just...
Did you feel like it was totally different? Like you walked into a ball of love?
People were so friendly and just talkative, and I was really kind of surprised.
Mental, like, holy shit, come to this party, come to that party, you're pulled in this direction, let's go eat here, let's do this. It's like the craziest, it's just a feeling of abundance, happiness and love. Like, everyone is just there to take care of each other and have fun.
And I'm always used to going places. Yeah, and there's alcohol. There's always that. And I always feel like I go so many places where I feel like I'm the weirdo, and then you get this group together, and it's all the weirdos coming together. And that's, I think, really amazing.
It is, and we're weirdos from different parts of life in different areas. That's the love. It's like the center of the big, party is we're all weirdos. We're all here to love each other. We're leaving life behind because we're sort of all on like a vacation, and we're just here to have fun. So fuck anything, any preconceived idea, and let's just have a good time together.
All right, we are almost at the end of our Outtakes episode, Sloppy Seconds Volume 3. Before we go, Felissa did have just a couple of thoughts about her character from the Hatchet series and how people tend to compare it to her real-life persona. Enjoy.
Yeah, my character is so... People want to say, oh, well, it's you. But, I mean, she's crazy and fun and wild and ridiculous. So I love that character.
All right, Champagne Dreamers, this is lazy editor Janessa talking to you. Now, you may or may not have noticed if you were one of the first 8 people to listen to it before I took the track down, but there was an earlier version of this podcast. I was working late into the night and I didn't realize that I had stashed a piece of audio at the beginning that I wanted to come back and use later and just never came back to it. And of course, I didn't listen and proofread or proof listen, I guess, to the audio. And so I had an extra outtake from Tommy Faircloth. I had originally been planning to sneak this in somewhere in Felissa Rose's section. In this outtake, he talks about some of the visual Easter eggs that he included in his film Family Possessions. As we talked about in Tommy's full interview, Family Possessions features Mark Patton, who played Jesse in Nightmare on Elm Street 2. That film has a lot of homoeroticism and a lot of fan controversy about how they feel it fits into the series. So as he was making the film, he built some homages or visual throwbacks to that film. And here in this final outtake in Sloppy Seconds Volume 3, here's Tommy talking about those Easter eggs. Enjoy!
The scene where Mark's coming downstairs and he's going over to the girl's house to go swimming, and his dad's like, no, you get up to your room. I want everything unpacked, and he kind of stomps up the stairs. And I put that exact same scene in my film where, the kids the son wants to come outside and play, and the mom's like, no, you got to unpack your room, and he stomps up the stairs. I mean, it's little stupid little things like that, but I was like, these are little hidden Easter eggs that people that are, big fans of the film will see. And then at the end, I don't want to give away spoilers, but if you haven't seen it, but anyway, when the brother jumps out at the end, he's like, oh, I was in the closet, I couldn't get out, things like that. I just kind of put in there as little Easter eggs.
All right, that's all the outtakes that we have for Season 2 guests Tommy Faircloth, Heidi Moore, and Felissa Rose. If you haven't already done so, make sure you check out their full-length episodes of Janessa After Dark on SoundCloud, iTunes, or Stitcher. And again, please look for my new limited series podcast coming soon, Miss Jaye, The Renovation. And don't worry, horror fans, we've got a lot more in store for Season 2 of Janessa After Dark. This episode of Janessa After Dark Sloppy Seconds includes royalty-free tracks from bensound.com. The tracks featured in this episode include Actionable, our podcast intro, the song Buddy, which played between each of the interview segments, and the track Sexy, which you're listening to now. For these great royalty-free tracks and more, visit bensound, that's BEN sound.com. Janessa After Dark and Janessa After Dark Sloppy Seconds are written and directed by Chris M. Stoner and are Champagne Dreams Productions.